Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's interview, I get to sit down with both David Stearns and Leigh Barganier, that's son-in-law and granddaughter to Nelson Nash, and of course, also respectively, the president of the Nelson Nash Institute, IBC Concepts, and the director of marketing. Now, do let me jump in here and say, David, thank you for your service to our military as an American. I appreciate that. Leigh, your perspective as a wife and a mother and your professional background that you bring to bear for the Nelson Nash Institute. I just can't say enough. Thanks to David and Leigh for coming on, sharing their perspective. I'm looking forward to having them back. I want to be able to talk about the professional perspective, where the Nelson Nash Institute is at, the different programs and offerings that the Institute has that I've been able to participate in, the practitioner program, coaching academies that they put on, the Think Tank, the annual masterminding event that's held typically in Birmingham, Alabama, where it all started. So we had a great conversation where I'm getting to talk to them about their personal journey, family background, what it all looks like from their perspective, this becoming your own banker idea that originated in what I like to call the first family of infinite banking. I had a great time. Thanks again, David and Leigh, and I hope that you enjoy.
Here's the bottom line from my perspective.
I know that if I have those questions, other people have those questions. Professionals, consumers, everybody, people that are vetting the concept, they're going to have these questions as well. If I do, and I've been doing it, 11 years.
And if you think we're crazy, then go back and do some research and rethink your thinking.
We got some different views. I'd like to talk about those differences of views. Beautiful. So if we tried to paint more or less a chronological picture, a story for people to be able to follow, that means you first, David. So if you would just start at what I think might be the beginning of where you met Nelson, but again, you pick your starting point. I want you to paint the picture of your personal introduction, exposure, vetting, implementation of the infinite banking concept, because you learned about it in a way that's very interesting to me, because I see myself as being the Nelson type as my family continues to grow and get married and branch out and do all these things, right? So I think you got a real unique story there.
Yeah. Well, I guess my story is, I didn't know what I was getting involved with because when I met Nelson, this is before his IBC journey started. Okay, so it was strictly a personal relationship we had. It had nothing to do with life insurance or the infinite banking concept. I've told the story a bunch, but probably a lot of people already know it. So I married Nelson's daughter, Kim, in 1979. And I met Nelson and Mary, I think it was 2 days before the wedding. Kim says I'm wrong there. I think it was 2 days before the wedding. I lived in Hawaii. I was in the military in the United States Army. I was assigned to the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks. And my best friend in the artillery battalion we were in was a guy named Barry Nash. Okay, so he was Nelson's only son. And I sponsored him into the unit, and I knew him pretty well. I mean, I came in the unit in September of '78. He came in, gosh, in I think December or January '79, and we deployed to Korea for 6 weeks for a semi-annual, military exercise over in Korea in February. Anyway, the whole time that we were together, he kept telling me that I needed to meet his sister. And I'm sure everybody's been there and done that, man. Okay, I don't want to step on any toes here, but usually when you get set up with somebody's sister, it's usually not a good situation. At least I didn't think it was going to be. So we're in Korea, and freezing our tailbones off, and being all we can be over there. And he says, "Yeah, when we get back to Hawaii, my parents are going to be there. Plus, they brought my sister over. You need to meet her. Yeah, she's really cute." I said, no. So I didn't want to do it. So long story short is, her parents, Nelson and Mary Nash, ended up flying back to Birmingham, and Kim said, "Hey, listen, can I stay with Barry a little bit longer?" because I got nothing to do. So let me stay here. And and her father said, yeah, go ahead and stay. I don't know, a couple of weeks, a month, whatever it was, because you have an open return ticket. And so Barry lived in a two bedroom place on post on the installation, and so she had her own room there. So like probably a week after her parents left, we finally went out and had lunch. Barry and I and another fella, and he picked up Kim, and so that's the first time I met her. And so anyway, so we started hanging out, blah 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 blah. So that was in probably March of 1979. We ended up getting married in August of 79. So that's not a long um, courtship. But the reason August was picked was because I lived in a little tiny condo, or not a condo, a rental property, one bedroom place, studio apartment kind of place on the North Shore, and she was living with her brother. And so I was like, well, we need to get married. We could have a long courtship, but she can't stay with him forever because she was like freeloading over there, so she needed to find a place to live. And I went to the housing office at Schofield Barracks and said, "Listen, I'm getting engaged. I want to live on post. Do you have any quarters that will be available when I get married?" They said, "Well, there's nothing available now, but the big turnover in the military is usually in the summertime. So the best time to get quarters without waiting a long time would be August." So, so that was the marriage date, August. So you get on the list. Boom, get on the list. And so we got on the list, and like 2 weeks later, they said they had quarters available for us. So we got married in a tiny little wooden chapel at Schofield Barracks. It's not there anymore. They tore it down, called Cannoneer Chapel. It held maybe 100 people. World War II wood frame chapel. Got married by one of the installation chaplains. And I had a massive reception in the backyard of my battery commander's house. We had a keg of beer and a potluck spread. And that was that was the good old days when you get married for $50, right? So that's how I met Nelson. We picked him up at the airport 2 days before the wedding. And I had spoken to him, but I never had met him because he was in Birmingham, obviously, and I was in Hawaii. But Barry was like really being, really running for us. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. You don't worry about it. This isn't nothing bad, da 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 da. But the first reaction I got from Nelson was, give me some family references that I can go interview. And so my parents lived in New York. Okay, my father retired from the military in '69, and so he wanted some people that he could talk to that knew the family and obviously knew me. So my parents gave him like some references down in the southeast, so he didn't have to travel so far. One of them was in Montgomery, Alabama. He was a retired Air Force colonel, and the other guy was in Columbus, Georgia. He was a retired Army officer. So Nelson got in his car and called him up, made an appointment, went over there and interviewed him, talked to him about about the family, and I guess they said the right things because he didn't demand that we stop going through the wedding. So he flew over, we picked him up and shook his hand. The first thing he said to me, quote unquote, "Boy, we got to talk." And it's like gulp. I'm a little bit nervous about that. That's all he said. And so we loaded him up, and Kim found a really nice little it's kind of a resort. They had little bungalows up on the North Shore of Hawaii, little bungalows, not too expensive, and I'm pretty sure that Kim's grandparents came over with Nelson and Mary for the wedding. I think so. But anyway, so we put them in there up in that bungalow, and then as soon as they got settled in, I sat down at the table with Nelson, and he pulls out some paperwork and puts it in front of me and says, "Sign here." It was not a prenup. It was an insurance policy application for a whole life policy for Equitable Life. And it's like, okay, where do I sign? This is easy. So I had no idea what I was doing except for buying life insurance. And so that was my introduction to Mr. Nash, number one. And that was my introduction to life insurance, number two.
Well, so I'm obviously very interested, like I said, from my own personal perspective of we're bringing our children up not just with policies and the buying of policies being normal, but the using of policies. And then as our family grows, I'm very interested in the language and the
Mhm.
experiences, of other people as I try to cultivate, this normal, natural expansion of this paradigm of
Yep.
privatized family banking, right? So, but that's not
Yep.
even where, it wasn't pitched to you that way. It wasn't painted to you as that way. But obviously, Nelson felt very strongly about whole life
He,
insurance and you owning it, right?
yeah, I mean, if you want to be successful, Jesse, okay, here's the only language you need to know. Sign here.
After I
Okay.
say boy, sign
Well,
here.
it might be a woman that you're talking to though,
Right,
so
right,
don't
right,
just like
right. Girl, sign here.
sign here, and that. So you got to put them in a position where they feel like that's the lesser of two evils. No, no, you're right. Nelson. We all know from reading Becoming a Banker that he had three influences on his life, right? Number one, he was a Christian. Number two, he was a forester. And number three, he was an avid historian and amateur economist. He liked to read a lot, and he believed, and it's true, that history is basically the history of economics. Because everything that happens, it happens because the people are following the money trail. Wars, migrations, you name it. There's money involved. Okay, so he, he discovered the Austrian school, accidentally somebody gave him a book, read this. And he says, man, where you been hiding this stuff from me? Because he thought he was highly educated, a college graduate and whatnot. And they said, this is out there easily accessible. Freedom, the Foundation of Economic Education publishes these articles on a monthly basis because subscribe to it. And so he got involved in that. So that's the Austrian piece. It's libertarian economics where, it's about human action, not government intervention. So those three things: Austrian, forestry, thinking long range, taking control of what you're doing, managing, you know, forest land, developing long-term, structures on how to maintain your cash flow, and the Christian ethic. That's what started the whole thing with him. So, but the IBC thing, the infinite banking concept, um, really, like most things that happen, when you really hit a wall, right? When you really have a significant challenge that you cannot solve, and you're almost in panic mode, and some people find the answer, different ways, either through prayer or through, taking action or whatever. But, if you try to solve a problem and you come up with a solution that's an emotional problem that's critically important to your life, all your energy, okay, is devoted towards coming up with a solution. That's what happened to Nelson. And luckily, his background allowed him to see the answer, and that was to, um, develop a privatized banking system. Since he was a life insurance agent, and all he saw his whole life, the platform for the banking solution was the policies, the whole life policies. That I mean, if he wasn't in the insurance industry, he wouldn't got close to it, close to the answer. So yeah, he did that to personally bail himself out, and then once he got on stable ground where he could keep going financially, then he started teaching this to his clients, who he thought had a need for it, and most of them were business owners, and he saw that they could use it for cash flow management and control, and recapture money. And then the next thing he did was, hey, listen, my system, quote unquote, is not big enough. Uh, I cannot transfer all my debt into an insurance policy construct. I need to buy more life insurance. And of course, being an agent, as long as you have, insurable interest in yourself or somebody else, and that's, why not buy as much as you can buy? So the
Let me jump
timeline
in
for
there if I
that was
can,
like,
David.
say what?
I was gonna ask. I hate to interrupt you. I just want you to flow, but I also would like a little bit more detail. Anything that sticks out to you
Hmm.
between where you're saying, 79,
Yeah.
getting married, getting a policy on you. Nelson wasn't out teaching infinite banking at that point. So I'm really curious. Of course, you know a bunch now,
Yeah.
but if you could go back into what you knew then when you're married, getting a policy, Nelson, he's an agent, he's doing whole life. He obviously thought that that was important. You're going to participate, you're going to get a policy. What did you see from your position then into the family, into Nelson's? I mean, what did you hear through the
All it
grapevine, even through
was,
Kim or whatever? Like,
yeah, go back to becoming your own banker and read, how it got started. And he tells you the current events. So 1979, I got married. Okay, 1981, his brother died of a heart attack. So that was a big punch because he had one, two, three brothers, and his oldest brother was like the kingpin, and Nelson really looked up to him. He was an
okay.
insurance agent. He was a State Farm guy. He dropped dead from a heart attack. He was
All right, so
51.
that was his oldest brother. I didn't know that. All right,
His
so
oldest
but
brother.
again, you from
Yeah.
your perspective, that's
Right.
family news that you're
Right.
hearing about.
Okay. I was just buying life insurance is all I was doing. It was just like, whenever we had an event, like, then I would buy life insurance. So 1981, his brother died. In 1981, my first daughter was born. Okay. And so the idea was he was going to, like, when I came back from Hawaii, we're going to, put her through underwriting. Well, she was diagnosed with cancer at 5 weeks. So that was a obviously off the table. Number one. Number two was that really hit him hard also. And then, and some other things happened, boom, boom, boom. So anyway, so he started really thinking about this thing, um, in the early 80s, but there's no IBC, not until a little bit later on. Okay. But for me personally, you know, all I was doing was buying life insurance on myself or my wife or my kids. There was nothing about using cash value as collateral for loans from the insurance carrier. The first time the light came on for me was 1992. Okay. We were moving to Savannah, Georgia, and we're going to buy a house, and I needed to put down 20% for a conventional mortgage. I didn't have the money. So I called up Nelson and says, "Hey, can I do a policy loan for a down payment uh, for a house?" He goes, "Absolutely. How much do you need?" I told him it was like, I don't know, $20,000, something like that. He said, "Yeah." He goes, "We'll get a check in the mail to you. It'll probably take a week to get it to you, whatever." Da, da, da. I said, "Okay, fine." And then I started thinking about it. He says, "Oh no, when I fill out my application uh, to buy the house, not the paperwork to buy the house, they're going to ask me where I got the funds from for the down payment." And I didn't want to tell them I had to borrow the money because if I borrowed the money for down payment, they wouldn't approve my loan for the house. They typically don't do that. "Hey, I went to a loan shark and borrowed the money, so here, I qualify for a mortgage." "No, you don't." Well, finally, they asked me, "Where'd you get the money from?" I said, "I borrowed it from a life insurance policy." And they said, "Oh, no problem. That's not the same thing as borrowing it from a third party lender. Okay, so you're not 100% financing your home." So that's the first time I thought, wait, okay, what is different here? Why is this different than a conventional loan? So that was 1992. That was the first time that I thought about it. And then what would typically happen was Nelson would call me up and say, "Hey, I'm buying a new airplane. I'm I'm bar I'm borrowing some money from a couple of your policies, just to let you know." Yeah, because he was my agent, so he managed everything. It's like, okay. Or, "Hey, it's time for a new car." What he would do, we'd purchase cars just like out of the book. We'd purchase cars with policy loans, and we set up a segregated checking account, and I'd lease the cars back to him for 2 years, and that would pay back the policy loan. And then after the 2 years, um, I would drive the car for a couple of years and sell it. So we kept doing that over and over and over again. So that was really the first time that we looked at IBC. But this is way before the book was written, and this is way before he was doing seminars on a regular basis. So I would say that, from 92 to like 96, we were doing IBC in our family. We named the company Lorelei Leasing. Remember that, Lee?
Yeah.
Lorelei, Laura for Lauren, my first daughter, Lee for Lee, the one on this podcast. That was our little leasing company. It was just like out of the book. We'd buy cars, policy loans, and I would own the car, I'd lease it back to Nelson, I'd lease it to somebody else, and then we rolled them every 2 years. So
Okay. Now, I'm not going to know, Lee, where you're going to need to jump in. So this, as we're painting the picture of this story, you keep tabs on this stuff. All right. If the down payment on the house was your first light bulb moment, personally, David, I'd love to know about subsequent ones because I can definitely remember getting my first policy. For me, I paid off debt aggressively in the beginning. I had student loans, I had a car note, I had credit cards. But I just remember that, in the second year, third year, as I got my first policy and then bought a second policy as well, I still had follow-up aha moments of, oh, I can also do this, or it also works like this, or this is also important. What else along your line was another place or time or anything that struck you again with more insight into the concept?
um, I think it's a different dynamic, okay? And it was, you know, we I was like really uh working 24/7 in the military uh up until like 2000. So we watched Nelson from afar. I had no idea how he was building the business, the IBC business, because this is before social media. This is before everything. And he finally built a little website, a little one pager. And so that was my first exposure to what he was doing. So we didn't know what he was doing. We just thought it was, it was just a family thing, and from my perspective. Okay. So, you know, what I really saw what he was doing was when we actually moved to Birmingham in 2000. Okay, I took an assignment here to retire here from the Army. And so obviously we're really close to Nelson and Mary, so we'd see what he was doing. And we had the opportunity to go to some of his seminars. And so I could see how he was doing it, whatever. And it was the way he taught the seminar was so different and so novel that, I mean, I would say most people, I'm talking about most people, I'm talking about like 90% of the folks that sat in the seminar, they didn't have a clue what he was talking about. Not a clue. Okay. They might have pretended like they did. I'm talking about civilians now, but customers, clients, whatever. Um, they'd sit there and they nod their head and they'd say, this is great stuff. But most of them just had no idea when you start talking about, all water on the earth is connected, okay, whether it be vapor, ice, or liquid, uh, how a grocery store works, all that stuff. People go, what is he talking about? I mean, they didn't have a clue, okay? And so some of them, some of the ones that got it were actually in the insurance industry, okay? And they're the ones that I'm not saying convinced Nelson, but said, Nelson, you need to put all your seminar notes into a book, okay? Because you're just scratching the surface. You can't talk to everybody on the planet, and you need to put this in a book and get it out there. And so that's what he did. And he started writing the book in '99, something like that. He published it in 2000. Um, and we moved to Birmingham in 2000. So I saw that. Okay, here's the book. Wow, this is cool. But again, I didn't give it any thought because I was busy doing other things. And then, but he said, listen, in 2001, he goes, when are you going to retire from the Army? I need help with this because I can't handle uh, uh, this thing is growing too fast. People want to buy books. They got to ship books. They want me to schedule and seminar and travel to locations, this, that, this, that. I can't do it myself because I need your help. And of course, 9/11 hit, boom. And I said, I can't retire right now because 9/11, things are really obviously ramping up. And so I didn't get out of the military in 2004. But since I was in Birmingham, I worked with him and I helped him streamline everything. I helped him create a client management system so he could track people that were contacting him, track orders, track that. He could put his seminar information in there. I convinced him to buy a laptop and created a PowerPoint for him to use in a seminar because he was using VGT slides. Most people don't know what those are.
I don't think me and Leigh do. Could you tell us?
The clear acetates that you have when you remember when you were in math class in high school in geometry, you had an overhead projector, and the teacher would put a clear acetate on there and take her marker and write stuff on it and it'd project up on the wall.
Yes, I just didn't remember the name.
He had a box of clear, slides, and he just throw them up there, boom, 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 as he was going through a seminar. So I created a PowerPoint for him from that. I remember that distinctly. So I was working with him, after hours to help him, grow his business. And he had a couple of guys in Birmingham that he worked with. He had an agreement with them, and one of them, I'm still working with that. He's my web guy. They recorded a seminar and produced a DVD on that. They created the audio CD, which is still available. And anyway, they helped him really launch this thing. And then when I finally retired from the military, I came on board and I said, okay, he said, I want you to work with me. I said, okay, fine.
Okay, if you'll let me put a pin in that right there then, because I can definitely already tell I'm gonna accommodate y'all's time frame. I'm gonna have to hold the professional side more or less at arm's length. Y'all are gonna have to come back, have another sit down with me, so we can. So yeah. All right, was for the seminars, David. Were you invited? Did he ask you to come? Did you raise your hand? Did Kim say, "Hey, I think we ought to go support that"? I mean, what did that even look or sound like?
His seminar was really formal back in the beginning. I mean, really, really formal because he hadn't memorized it yet. I went to one or two in Birmingham. And if you look at, I do have the original DVDs. The seminar's going to sell those anymore, but the original ones it's in a tiered classroom. And actually, one of my daughters is sitting in the front row. They're all sitting there smiling, doing their head like this. You don't know what he's talking about, do you? No. But I went to a couple of seminars with him, and we, it was just a family thing. It wasn't called the infinite banking concept. It's just what we did. We just used our life insurance to finance our life. And when it was time for another policy, and there was different life events that necessitated another policy. Okay. Like I like to talk about one is like, if I had another kid, guess what? Another policy. If I got promoted and I had a little bit more cash flow, then another policy. When I decided to retire, I bought another policy in lieu of using the military survivor benefits program. I figured out what that was going to cost, and I just used that money to buy another whole life policy so I can manage that instead of having the money go through the government. So everything we did with the infinite banking concept, it was just what we did. It was not called infinite banking. It was not called becoming your own banker. It was just like you get as much whole life as you could afford, and you use it when you needed to use it. And that as simple as that. There was no magic. There was no, what's the better way to do it? All that stuff didn't come up until after I started working with him in 2004. And then we started really peeling back the onion and figuring out what this is all about.
Okay. Well, Leigh, where do you see your entry point then? When did anything at all even get on your radar about this is what David's just saying. This is what we do as a family. We buy life insurance. We use it when we have needs. What was the first thing that you can recollect even?
No, I mean, I remember always having conversations about policies. Like that was very common to, just at the dinner table, we always, ate dinner together as a family. And then, of course, with extended family, a lot of conversations around the dinner table. And so there was a lot of conversation about policies and life insurance. So I just grew up around that type of language. I was thinking back to when he wrote the book. I was born in 1984. And so I was 16 in 2000 when that book came out. And I remember he had it professionally printed, but he didn't have it bound. And so I remember putting the book together by hand. He had it, we had it, all the pages kind of correlated together. And I would go down the stack and put them together by hand with a binding machine, the book. That was, like I said, it just kind of always grew up around it, and just have vivid memories of putting that book together and seeing that very first logo that he had long ago on his business card. I don't know if anybody remembers those old business cards that he had. I always remember seeing that in his office and on his business cards and envelopes, letterhead, that sort of thing. Just kind of always being around.
So this is also neat for me because of everything you're saying, David. And when our fourth child was recently born, he had a policy on him in less than a month.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was looking through some photos on my phone just this week, and I can see pictures years ago of my girl in my lap while I'm editing or putting a policy proposal or whatever together for somebody at my desk in my home office. So like these insights are terribly interesting to me. And with Nelson having been the first generation to implement the concept, there's no family ahead of y'all, even if I know there are other families that have implemented this. I have clients that have implemented this multi-generationally, but still, for Nelson to have been the first generation and for y'all to have practiced the concept as long as you have, obviously, but then also represent the second, Leigh, the third, and then your two boys, fourth generation, they're already hearing something. I don't know what they're hearing, but they're already hearing some things that aren't happening in the normal household, probably. Yep. So it's all very interesting to me. All right. I wonder for both of you then, was there anything along the way where you questioned, yeah, okay, I know this is how we do this as a family. Like I had my boy ask me something the other day, and it's something from scripture, but he's just at an age where he's questioning things. Like, hey, Dad, why do we do this? Why is it this way? Right. So it's natural to question things. So I wonder what things y'all maybe question along the way to where you thought, well, okay, that works great for that down payment that I wanted on the house or whatever. But this part of it, like any sticking points that y'all had to work through, talk through, however you handled it, I'm curious about that.
Well, my biggest challenge was my wife. She's all about rate of return, okay, and interest rates. She doesn't understand, the importance of having an asset that's uninterrupted compounding. Okay, something that if you do it right, the interest payment is not what the insurance company says it is. It's less than that. You know what I'm talking about, Jesse, when I say that?
I know what you're describing when you say that. Yes, sir.
Okay, a 5% interest rate on a policy loan, if you pay it back before the policy renews, doesn't come out to 5%. It's much less. But I'll leave that out there for further conversation. And she does, and so those two things, and also the control aspect. But she does now. But initially, it was like, didn't understand the difference. She'd rather, put it in a CD for 4.5% than have it sit in the policy for 4%. But now she's totally on board. Now she gets it big time. So that was a good challenge in the early years for me. And I wasn't articulate enough to defend it and talk about it.
That's a good example. And I think that when somebody says, okay, I see this, I see that, but I question this part, and they put up something, and rate of return could be a great example, of course, it really lets you have an insight, whether you can articulate a defense or an answer or a solution to the point that they're raising. It's still, when they raise their hand and say, well, I've got a question about the rate of return. Couldn't we get a better rate of return X, Y, or Z over here or there? It still lets you know where somebody's at. And like I said, in my own personal experience of implementing this concept, I knew enough to know that I needed to get started, recapture that debt, have the control over my consumer debt, at least stop the bleeding of interest dollars elsewhere. But that doesn't mean and didn't mean that I knew the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh advantages of the one or two that I did understand. Does that make sense? So same question, Leigh. Has there been anything that you can recollect in your trajectory that you questioned and had to work through or have a conversation through or revisit some material? Anything?
Yes, I have a very vivid memory again. When I started my first job. So I had an internship, a great internship, paid internship at a wonderful publishing company right out of college. And it was in the magazine industry. And unfortunately, that was when the magazine industry just really shuttered. So they were, folding magazines left and right and, no longer in publication. So then I went on to get my first job, which I was with for 17 years. And so when I went into that job and signed all the paperwork, the onboarding that you do anytime you're starting a new job, fill out your tax papers, that sort of thing. The 401k retirement talk came up. And I declined. I said, no, I'm not interested in doing that. Oh, you need to, because they have a great match here. They match you 7% of anything that you put in. So you really need to do this. Nope, not interested. Okay. So, a couple weeks go by or whatever. They come back to me. The HR person comes back to me and basically sits there and corners me and lectures me on the importance of retirement. And I am so young and I am such an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about. You need to be thinking long term and thinking about your retirement. You're a fool if you're not doing this. And I just had to push back. And I said, no, I'm not interested in doing this. And because all along I knew I had my own policies. And so that was where I put my money, is in those policies instead of this, 401k. So, but it just was a real world example of, running into these people who think that they know so much better than you do, and how people think differently and how differently I was raised, to push back on that and say, this is not really what I want to do. And I remember having that conversation with Dad, having that conversation with Papa as well. Hey, this is what's going on at work. They're really pushing me to do a 401k. And, they both were like, nope, don't do it. Don't do it. So just having that guidance there, having that background and wherewithal to know that is not the best place for my money. So, that was, like I said, very early on in my career, I faced that.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, but the scripture that does come to mind, because that's a well-intentioned person. That person from HR,
Right.
That's a well-intentioned
Yes.
person. They're doing what anybody in their position would do, knowing what they know.
Right.
And yet the scripture that comes to mind to me is they're blind leaders of the blind, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's just where they're at. As well-intentioned as they may be, they're the blind leading the blind.
Yep.
I mean, my goodness. All right. So this is one thing I think of is, who knows where our children are going to go, right? Like, again, Leigh, you got a couple of boys and we've got children that they're developing enough character. Y'all play ball, or one of them plays ball, right? It's really fun seeing these characters develop, but one thing I really like to drive home with our children is no matter what you choose to do, just know why you're choosing it. I love it that you'll question something and work through something and arrive at the solution for yourself, because then you're not being, blind yourself or being led by the blind. Anyway. All right. So what'd you go to college for?
So I went to college for communications. I'm one of the very few people, I think, that actually do for a living what they went to school to get their degree in. So I actually majored in communications and minored in business and psychology, of all things.
I love it. But you also said that you worked in a different career or field or job for 17 years. Long track record.
Yep.
What could you say about that background?
So that was, again, I was in a communications role at at a private school, which, still love and support to this day. So that was a great environment to be in. I think that we need good teachers out there, and I just am not one of those people who is blessed to be a teacher, and so realized that very quickly. But I appreciated and enjoyed supporting teachers in that role that I had for 17 years, and obviously it was a great place to work. So that's why I was there for so long.
I love it. And that's obviously how you get to play into your gifts and your experience with the N&I and everything. But I'm still going to hold that off at arm's length. We got to. So tell me then more recent news, pick any spot that you want, of how y'all use policies now, what you've personally used policies for within your own families.
Well, cars. We have every single one of my cars that I've purchased on my own as an adult has been through a policy loan. And now I've been married now, coming up on 18 years this year. My husband and I, both of our cars now, since our marriage life, has been purchased through policy loans. We've also used policy loans for home renovation projects. We bought a house that was built in 1949. It was beautifully maintained, but had never been updated. So it was a blast from the past, time machine. And so when we bought it, we knew obviously we had to do a lot of renovating to bring it up to kind of modern day conveniences. And so we thankfully, though, we knew that going into this house, purchasing this house, that we had access to that cash value sitting there that we could use to renovate a house. So we've done that as well. But then also, paying for my boys' private school education. We paid tuition through those policies. And just we use it for all of our major life financial purchases. We use through policy loans.
I love it. So very much a lifestyle, the things that you're just doing anyway, and
Yep.
keeping that in the family. I love it.
Yep.
How about you, David? Anything stick out to you?
Well, I'm something that didn't stick out to me. Maybe I shouldn't talk about this, but my wife was like, she wanted to buy this lake house, and she said, "Hey, man, we got enough. We can do it. We got $2.5 million in cash value. Let's buy this house." I said, at my age, I don't think that that's something we need to do. So that's something that we didn't do, but we had the opportunity, and well, we didn't know if we could afford it or not, because I think it ended up being a bidding war, but I don't know. Well, hopefully it was, so I get out of the doghouse. But so that leads me to the concept of, if you have cash, opportunities will find you. And that lake house found her. So, but anyway, we've been I've been blessed beyond belief. Okay. Because we can talk about windfalls too, if you want to, in this conversation, but we have not been in debt. Let me knock on my wood desk here. We have not been in debt since like 2003 or 4. And I'm not counting policy loans. Like, I'm talking about any kind of conventional debt, mortgage, car payments, anything. So our cash flow on a monthly basis is utilities, groceries, whatever. But we either own our debt or we're totally out of debt, simply because IBC, like you suggested earlier, Jesse, is a lifestyle. It's also a mindset. Okay, it causes you, when you're driving the boat. Okay, you look for different, as you're driving. You see hazards out there. You see opportunities. It makes you think differently. You're thinking not from a protective standpoint, like, we can't afford that, or what do we have to give up to get that, or how are we going to pay this thing, or whatever. You see things that other people don't see, because you have a different mindset on what you're doing financially, and it opens it up differently. I mean, it changes the way you tithe, for example, because you've always got access to cash, so you can tithe accordingly. You don't have to worry about, can I afford that or not. So, you know, when I do my presentation at these different meetings, whatever, I show our family. When I say our family, it's just my family. Like, I don't include what Lee owns or my other three kids own, or just what Kim and I own, our policy construct, what it looks like. And I show everything, probably way too much, okay, to say, listen, this is what we're doing. So this is not just talk, this is what we're doing. And after I did one of my presentations, one of our new practitioners came up to me and said, you're not doing the infinite banking concept. I said, yeah, you're right, I'm not. And so what does that mean if I'm not doing it? That means, $9 million in death benefit, almost $3 million in cash value, and our policy loans were maybe like $50,000. That was it. So you're not doing it because you don't have this substantial policy loan portfolio, okay, that you're servicing. Well, see, that's one of the challenges, and a lot of folks out there that are practitioners, they've kind of branched out and they find opportunities for people like me to use that cash value, okay, to grow wealth and whatnot. But hey, I guess I'm like Scrooge. Just sit there and look at the cash value grow. But yeah, it's just a different lifestyle. Okay, you just you really it's different, and we like I said, we're truly blessed. Of course, Kim had a couple of windfalls when her parents passed, and what do you do with that money? If you don't do something with it quickly, it disappears, if you know what I mean. So if you do have substantial debt within a policy construct, then that's a perfect place to plug a windfall. Okay. And it's a good opportunity to buy more policies too. So.
Well, what you make me think of, David, is, and I'm glad you circled back to windfalls, because I was thinking about the windfalls again, because it seems apparent to me that a second generation implementing this concept can look differently than the first generation who is starting it. It just seems much more likely that prior to windfalls, that the first generation is the generation that's establishing those windfalls. They may have larger outstanding policy loans going on because they're starting from scratch. That's been my experience. But you're in that generation that was, and taking nothing away from your general good stewardship, good choices, diligence, paying premiums, not taking anything away from that, but the windfalls allow you to have scale, to add scale to what it was that you were already doing. And for you to mention what you did about even being able to tithe differently, that's an opportunity in and of itself too. Opportunities presenting themselves to people with capital doesn't just mean opportunities for growing the capital more, opportunities for us to be even more generous. So I don't know, outside looking in, that's what occurs to me is, well, yeah, you're in that second generation. So infinite banking looks different than for a first generation, and then maybe a third generation. So I'm curious what you would say about anything that I just said, Lee, or tell us more about what it's like to be in that third generation. I don't care whether it's one practical thing is premiums that occurs to me. I'm not trying to make a clear subject change here, but like, how does an individual address appropriate premiums? David, earlier you said, well, find what you can afford and do that. That's a good answer. I think it's a answer though, right? I think there could be other answers to that. So I don't know. What would you say to that, Lee? The third generation, anything that your dad said or approaching premiums or any of it?
No, I mean, I've got kind of similar stories. It's funny. My husband has a very similar story to actually my father. When we were getting married, my grandfather, Papa, did the same exact thing, where he was like, "Here, boy, sign this." I mean, literally, same exact thing. So he made sure that he was set up with policies right away when we got married, and then same when we had children. Right, thankfully, by that point, he knew we need to go ahead and get these kids in underwriting as soon as possible, once they're born, because of what my sister went through with her cancer diagnosis. And so, again, that's where I kind of benefited from the generation that came before me, or my generation. They learned from those experiences. And so then, I was better set up, I feel like, because of those. And we have, our premiums are not anything huge by any means, but we are getting to that point in our lives where we can take on more. And so we know that. And so we are setting ourselves up for that. But we are very responsible, very, very responsible and honest bankers. My husband loves an amortization table. Sorry, I can't say that word. And so, we do that for every single policy that we go into to take loans from, or when we're looking at premiums for new policies. What exactly can we afford responsibly, and just be as honest as we can be from the very beginning, anytime that we are doing anything financially. I think that's so important, to just be very, very honest with yourselves and just say, what can I do? How can I use this money the best way that I should be using this money? Tithing, other ways to give back to missions, or to other organizations that we're affiliated with. So it's just really made us think about that financially, and have that as a center of our marriage conversations as well. And I feel like a lot of people don't have that. Jesse, I know when you were on our podcast, we talked about that, how it just, didn't really come up until much later in your marriage. But so, from the beginning, like I said, I feel like we were really blessed to learn from those people who came before us and be very open and honest about your finances from the beginning. And, I never will forget, Papa, one of the very first questions he asked my husband as well was, before we were married, was, how much was his mortgage? And okay, we'll deal with that later. And he was like, what are you talking about? And so, he was, by that point in his life, he was very forward and wasn't afraid to ask hard questions outright. So there you go. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's kind of my experiences around policies and premiums and that sort of thing.
It did. Yeah, I see 3 or 4 different ways to go, but you've both touched on spouses. So how about anything that you would share as a best practice or a suggestion for people to consider when it comes to, in my experience, both in my personal life and with working with clients, is that typically speaking, one person is more into the amortization scales and they want to see the numbers and the details and the nuances and all that kind of stuff. Somebody else is maybe more interested in the concepts, at least to the degree that it leads to the results that they want. Could be a lake house, could be whatever, right? They're interested in the results and maybe enough concept to see that the concept leads to the results. Any best practices that y'all would share? I don't think I've said this either. I consider y'all the first family of the infinite banking concept. I will refer to y'all in that way from now on. Y'all are the first family of the IBC. I think that's cool. But any best practices y'all would share?
Well, make sure that if the husband and the wife, the spouse, are totally included in every discussion. Okay, every decision. And as well as I do, Jesse, that usually one or the other doesn't either get it or want to get it. The spouse might be a Dave Ramsey fan, and his wife might say, "Listen, we need to look at this IBC thing. This is great." And hey, until they're both on board, it's gonna be nothing but friction. So that's important. And also, like Leigh suggested, if you're not open with your finances, okay, with your family, and discuss those on a routine basis, then you're wrong. Okay, you need to set up formal family. Some people call them banking meetings. Okay, where you sit down and the kids. I don't care if they're 5 years old.
Yep.
Everybody is involved. They know what money is, how it works, how it flows. The basic stuff about checking accounts and this and that, and how a credit card at 3% can really be a 22% credit card if you're not careful. And then just talk IBC. You just have a semi-annual formal meeting, where everybody, you might do it at the beach when you go there for a week, or you might do it wherever, and just so everybody understands what's going on, and then lay out and show the old spreadsheet about your policies. Okay, these are the policies, and these are the ones that I own. These are the ones your mother owns. Here's the secondary owners. Here's the beneficiaries. Here's what it's going to, da 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 da. If something happens, this is what's going to happen here and there and here and there. This is how you manage a policy. If you gain ownership of a policy, this is the first thing you do. Blah 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 blah. To have those discussions and make sure they're routine, and you follow a script so everybody gets the same information. And just start that mindset as early as possible. So that would be the biggest thing I would tell a family to do, because some folks, like my two son-in-laws, as far as I can remember and think about, they don't have any idea where their parents are financially, not a clue. And I tell one of my son-in-laws, man, he doesn't know. He all he knows is that his father's got an attorney. Okay, so it's like, okay, there you go. Good luck with that one if he passes.
That's typical.
So that's critically important. Even if you're not doing the infinite banking concept, you got to know what's going on, and don't be so protective of your financial secrets, even if they don't look so rosy. You owe it to your kids.
Yeah. I mean, Jesse, our conversations are a little bit more organic. They happen along whenever a big financial decision, we're discussing one. For example, we literally just went through the re-enrollment process for our kids for school year for next year. We signed this contract early on in the school year, and then you start paying on it, and it becomes binding later on in the summer, right before the school year starts. So we literally just had the conversation with our two boys, because we want them to know, like, we love you. We're investing in you. We're trying to provide for you the best way that we can provide for you with your education. And so, this is how much your school, it costs for us to send you to the school for every single year. And then this is where we're getting the money from. And I mean, here, had the policies pulled up on the computer. Here's what this is. These are life insurance policies that we own on you. This is how much money that we've put into these policies. This is how much money that we have access to. And this is where we're getting the money from to pay for this tuition that we owe. And then this is how we're going to pay it back. This is our plan to pay it back. So there, that table came back up. And to show them, like, these are the steps that we are taking, but we want to be very, like I said, very honest with them. And I think that that's important for kids to know. Like, we just don't want these kids to feel entitled, or any of that kind of thing. Like, we work really, really hard to provide for you, and to give you this life that, we're trying to give you the best life that we know how to give you. So we want them to be appreciative of that. And I think that they are, in their own way, as much as they can be, as 11 and 14-year-old boys can be. But anyway, so we just are very open and transparent with them about, here you go, here are the steps, and this is how much this costs. This is where the money's coming from. This is how we're going to pay it back. And then we'll do the same thing next year. So we don't have an annual meeting or anything like that. We just kind of organic conversations. We have a lot of talks in the car. I love, driving my boys around, because I think so many things come up in the car. And it's that captured time when they can't get away from you, and that there's no distractions or anything. So we've had a lot of great conversations in the car, and that sort of thing. So we just kind of address those questions as they come up. But one thing I will say that I do appreciate, and that I learned from, again, the generations before me, was I appreciated the fact that my grandparents sat down with my parents and had the conversation about what is going to happen when they pass away. Like, a lot of people don't want to have that conversation. It's very uncomfortable for them. But because they did that, everyone knew exactly what was going to happen when they passed away, because we all know that we're going to pass away. So now, in turn, I've had those conversations with my parents. Like, we have already started those conversations. We probably do need to sit down and do a formal conversation with all the siblings together at the table. But we've already had those discussions have already started, and we're not afraid to have those conversations. So again, it just is that piece that comes to mind whenever you do have to have these difficult conversations with each other and your loved ones.
Intentionality beats randomness every day of the week, twice on Sundays. That's for sure. All right. There's so much more that I want to do with y'all. Here's what I'm gonna suggest. I'd love to have y'all come back and let's have a professional side of the conversation. I mean, this Infinite Banking Initiative podcast, the N&I Think Tank Coaching Academy. There's so much there. Y'all have active roles there that I'd love to dig in on. I also see an opportunity where we could field some round table type conversations that y'all have brought up. If you're open to, I've got a series on my channel where I sit down with other practitioners, other agents, even consumers, different folks to talk about, why not the 7% match on the 401k that my job is offering me? Or what do you do, David? When you do have these structured family meetings, I want some insights. I mean, I know how I run mine, and I think we can always level them up. So all that to say, we should have another interview. You're welcome to the roundtable anytime. I'd like to have some rapid fire questions as we round out our time together. How's that sound?
Okay.
Don't be too rapid.
Okay. So same question for either of y'all, and I'll just get both of y'all's answers. I'd love to know a recent favorite book or podcast of y'all's, something you're listening to or reading.
I'm reading A Union with Christ by Sinclair Ferguson. It's my current read. Okay.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. My favorite podcast is a Swedish couple that are building a sailboat on a farm in Sweden. Hey,
wow.
You can't be at work all the time, right?
Yep. He's definitely he loves those sailboats. Mine is probably podcast wise. I like that how I built this podcast, and it just is conversations with different business owners or somebody who came up with an idea, invention, whatever, and just the story behind that. I just love deep dives on those type of things. But then I also listen to Storytellers Live. I feel like that's a good encouragement for women. They kind of just tell their stories and where they've seen Christ work in their family in their lives. And then, of course, I guess I do have to say that I love Homeworthy, which is kind of my guilty pleasure. It is a interior design video series on YouTube, and it's just I really love interior design. So that's kind of my escape, if you will, from work and the everyday grind.
Okay, well, then that leads into my next question, which is either would you name a hobby that you have and enjoy or a secret talent that people may or may not know that you have?
My hobby is stereos, audio equipment. So I take grief for that all the time from, and I don't, what do you think, Leigh? I guess I'm a comedian at heart, right?
He tries to be. He thinks he's funny.
I try to be funny, but I fall flat most of the time. So
he's typical dad jokes, grandpa jokes. They've gotten worse over the years. I would say
they work well with waitresses though in restaurants. So
I'll say that my hobby is definitely cooking. I love getting in the kitchen. That's my way to really unwind at the end of the day. Cook a meal for the family, and again, go back to that kitchen table and eat together as a family. I think that's so important. So definitely cooking.
Fantastic. What's one of your favorite quotes?
Leave something better than you found it. That's something that I always think in my mind. Did I leave this place or this thing or this situation better than I found it?
All mine are IBC related, so that's
fine. Tell me one.
Think long range is my favorite quote. Yeah,
I love it. That was the theme of this year's 2026 Think Tank. Fantastic. Do you have? I'll ask this one because it's relevant. Is there a favorite Bible character that you have, or maybe one that is your favorite or that you connect with in this seasonal life, whatever that might look like for you?
Paul is my go-to guy for everything. Okay. Without him, I don't know where we'd be. So, and I know you're asking for something like Jonah or Ezekiel or David or Moses, whatever, but just Paul's contribution to everything in his writings is my main thing.
No, I'm not wanting anything particular.
Yeah.
I want you to say exactly what first came to you. I love, yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the New Testament, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm currently reading Numbers, and so I guess I have to say Moses because of where I am reading and just yeah, the journey that he's taken. So up to this point in Numbers. So I've just really enjoyed learning more about Moses and you know, just the journey. So yeah.
Such a journey. So famous, they wrote another book about it, that Exodus book,
Yes, yes.
which is relevant to Nelson's second book. I mean, I use that reference all the time, you know, out of Egypt into Babylon and such. What's the most or one of the most impactful things somebody ever said to you?
I'll tell you one that my father always said to me growing up, don't take it personally.
Oh, really?
Yes, all the time. Don't take it personally. Anytime there was girl drama, you know, feelings got hurt, whatever, don't take it personally. And I think that that's so important though, is because it's not always about maybe not about what's going on with you, it's about what's going on with that person. So you never know what is going on in that person's life and what kind of day they've had, what kind of situation they just came from or whatever. So if I have any kind of like negative interaction with somebody, I always am like, you know what? I don't know what their day was like, what their day entailed. So I don't need to take their reaction to me personally. Anyway, I don't mean to be negative on that at all. It's more about just I guess extending grace to those around us.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I think the most insightful quote I got was rethink your thinking constantly on a daily basis, because it's so easy to be complacent and you know, with arrival syndrome. So I don't do that. I don't rethink my thinking, but I think that's the most impactful thing that I've heard, you know. So because it all starts with how you think and it all ends with how you think. So
How about one of your go-to healthy habits?
um, exercise every morning at 5 a.m.
Walking, definitely getting out, fresh air, walking. I can tell when I don't do it. It's I can tell my mood is not where it needs to be. My mindset.
Sunrise or sunset?
5 a.m., man, sunrise.
Sunset.
Chase the sun, man. So, you know,
Beach or mountains?
beach,
Yep, beach as well.
Picnic or restaurant?
restaurant,
Restaurant.
Okay. Fire pit or movie?
I'd say movie.
well, uh, movies are definitely easier than fire pits. So,
You're not wrong. You're not
yeah.
wrong. What's one of the most interesting places you've ever visited?
Oh boy, I don't know. I would say Majorca. I loved Majorca. We went a couple years ago and it was just absolutely beautiful, breathtaking.
Been to a lot of places. Interesting.
Yeah, for the guy that was stationed in Hawaii, here I am asking that question.
Well, that's not, you know, interesting is the question was interesting, right? Yeah, I would say, you know, not the place I loved the most, but the most interesting was probably, you know, some, you know, villages in Korea back in the late 70s, you know.
Very cool. What characteristic do you value most in someone?
Honesty. I just yeah, honesty.
Yeah. Loyalty.
Awesome. Last question. Got this one from my boys at the supper table. Would you rather be able to breathe underwater or fly?
Fly.
I was gonna say fly too, but it would be cool to be able to just swim around and see all the different levels of the ocean and the wildlife that people have never even seen it with their own eyes. That would be pretty cool too. So
Fantastic. Y'all, this has been a blast for me. If you look at the time, I kept up my end of the deal. You gave me some parameters. Okay. I just want you to know that I was able to do that. So hopefully you'll feel very welcome to come back again. But it's really, 2 nights ago, I was having a hard time going to sleep. 2 nights ago, not last night, 2 nights ago, I was thinking, it's like, man, I get to have that conversation. So I really, really, really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Enjoyed it, Jesse. Good job, man.
Appreciate y'all.
Thanks,
Y'all have a great
Jesse.
day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was an absolute blast for me to get to talk with David and Leigh both at the same time, get their perspective. We'll have to have them back. If you would let me know down in the comment section questions that I should have asked, you'd like me to ask, anything you want us to dive deeper in on. And of course, you can find me at durhamtalents.com. You can learn more about the Nelson Nash Institute, David, Leigh, the message there at infinitebanking.org. And it is my hope that you live and leave a lasting legacy.
Do you usually stay on for full 2 hours and talk for 2 hours?
I'm slowing down, man.
Right? But you don't
I
have a
was on
sling.
with yesterday for an hour and 30 minutes, and he wore me out.
Great. Well, see there, Leigh gets an hour and a half, but I get tapped out in an hour. God,
It was an hour. Any podcast is over like 30 minutes is too long in my book.
it is what it is as far as the metrics and stuff. I try not to ignore that stuff, but I also just try to just organically do things, and it lands where it does, and people got to deal with that. Is where I'm at, also, at the same time.
All I try to do is make sure that whatever my exposure in the public domain, I come across as a normal guy, not some friggin' whack job with some hidden agenda or some revisionist theory, or
Right.
like, let me tell you a dirty little secret. Hang around to the end of this discussion, and you'll find out what's going on out there. None of that stuff, just what we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we started, and and if you think we're crazy, then go back and do some research and rethink your thinking, that kind of thing. So anyway, we're good.
Beautiful.